Good afternoon. My name's Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. Special announcement for all you that are on here. Shortly, in a couple of months, I will no longer be, don't worry, I'll still be the director, just not of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. We will be changing our name to the Children's Resource Centers. And so we will be known as the Children's Resource Center South. This is part of a statewide rebranding initiative. So all 5 regional centers will be renamed and rebranded. I wanted you to hear the news first, but I'm not sure where it's at. So please don't tell anybody else. Please, no, don't write it down anywhere. Don't, for gosh sakes, don't put it out on the internet anywhere. Don't put it on Facebook or that Instagrammy chat thing. Okay, just don't do it. Don't do it. But I wanted you to know because you're close personal friends of the show. So this is Conversations Aren't Showing Up for Kids. It's an informal time and space for families to learn, share, ask questions. We hope to make it as conversational as possible. And today I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to do that because I got a friend of mine who is joining us today. Katie Berg is the SNS Statewide Coordinator and the ES3 Grant Statewide Coordinator. And I am not going to ask her what those things mean. So what I want to talk about, though, is neurodiversity. And we want to take a deep dive into neurodiversity from an educator's perspective. So starting off with that first, welcome, Katie. And what do you mean by neurodiversity? This is a relatively new term.
Right. When we think about, like, I think it was first coined in like the 90s, right? But using it in like actual language all the time is something that probably the last 10 years, if that, it's really come across. When I think about what we mean by neurodiversity, I'm talking about the divergent state in which our brains kind of show up. And so in education, we and medically, we put a lot of labels to things. So a lot of people want to say, well, it's autism. Well, no, autism is just one way your brain works, right? We can think of kids who have emotional differences, like their regulatory system is different, or mental health scales of things and mental wellness. So when I think about neurodiversity, we got a lot of go-to labels. Autism in education, EBD, OHI, ADHD in medical realm.
Yeah.
You might think of somebody who has a sensory processing disorder, right? So we think about what typically we'll call like a neuromajority, which, you know, like there's a variance on how many people like or not like that phrase. It's basically your brain was built and focuses in on different things. And in our world, we label it. And so the neurodiversity label is to say, hey, no, can we just get back to the fact we all think differently? Right. And so when we think about that diversity, especially within education, and especially in education for students with IEPs, we're looking at how do we show up to make sure everybody can still access, engage, and progress, because everybody shows up with a variance. Sometimes the variance is so divergent from what we call a neuromajority that it actually causes barriers, whether they're barriers for the person or the environmental piece is actually the burying piece. The society and the environment is become a barrier to somebody whose brain is different than maybe the person sitting next to them. So when I think about neurodiversity, I try to stay away from the labels, but labels help us kind of formulate things. They put language to it. It helps us. So I'm thinking about people who might fall under autism, ADHD, emotional behavioral differences, mental health, things like that. But you can be just neurologically glitchy, right? And different, and that's all within that realm as well. So that's in my mind how we define neurodiversity.
Sometimes, you know, neurodivergency does not mean you can't learn.
Right.
It doesn't even mean you can't learn in a normal environment. It is so many things for so many different people. But when we start to talk about what do educators need to think in mind, we start to think about, as you said, those children who have obstacles or barriers to learning in what's a traditional way. And we have, for better or worse, we have developed a way of doing school for the last few decades. Maybe. I mean, it hasn't, we're still not all that old of a country. So anybody who said, well, we've always done it this, no.
1919 is when the public school system kind of solidified.
Yeah. And so then we started to formalize and we started to make it look the same across the United States. So that one classroom began to look like another classroom. Now, this worked for a while, because of the fact that people with disabilities, people with neurodiversity, people who thought differently or acted differently, they weren't really part of society. They were put aside. And so then we came to this point where like, well, that's not good for anyone. That's not good for what could be called neurotypical, the neuromajority. I like that. And also not good for those considered to be neurodiverse. And so then we said, let's bring it all together. But we maybe didn't think this through enough in how we changed the back end of our education about preparing teachers and preparing schools for a wider spectrum of thinkers, a wider spectrum of interactors who want to be in that room, who want to learn in that room, but there may be some obstacles and barriers. And so you haven't come up with, but you promote a skills-based approach to support the growth of social understanding and self-management of neurodiverse students. So want to get into the skill-based approach, but also would like to sort of talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind talking a little. I'm done talking, by the way. The rest of the time is yours. I'm done. About why social understanding and self-management. Why did you call those two things out? And then what sort of skills are we talking about that can be built?
Right. So we've always had all of these things that put in place, right? It's just what we need. And as you were talking, it made me think about our school systems were set up to make factory workers and very compliant, blind compliance. Like you needed a system, you had to fit in it. And if you didn't fit, we didn't need you. Right. So that's not the case now. And what I think is really interesting is the massive jump in technology we've had has made access for people who have varying skill sets and lots of different stuff, communication, physical big pieces, all the different things has blown up in the last, like 30 years. And so your access is there, and we're really seeing how much the environment is disabling. But now that the environment's being broken down by the technology availability, now we're seeing so many more voices and so many more perspectives that we're constantly trying to adjust. Where before we were streamlined. We're like, nope, we need this and we're producing this. Well, we don't even need that blind compliant factory worker anymore. Like the school, like that's done, right? We're over that. Technology has taken care of that. Therefore, we're retrofitting everything now. And our system is set up for something we don't need anymore. And now that we have technology and people can access and we hear our voice, we're now seeing like, oh my gosh, what were we missing? Because there wasn't like a bunch of educators going, we refuse to teach. I'm sure there's somebody out there that said no. Right. But most people don't get an education to like tell kids, I don't want you near me. Right. But it happens. But it happens because we don't know what's going on. And now we're going, wait, this is what's going on. And so we're trying to adjust, but change is hard. So
right now, don't skip over that change is hard. I mean, this is the education system is huge.
Right.
It is full of people with wonderful, wonderful hearts that are desiring to make change, that are desiring to teach the next group of people. It is also a very big business.
Right.
It's also a very large government institution. All these things take time to change. And the system itself never wants to change.
Oh.
The system does what the system does because that's what it's good at. That's what it's comfortable at. That's giving it its outcomes that it wants. So you can't look at systems to sit there and go, oh, I want to do something different. Systems will continue to do the same thing over and over again. And so changing them can be really, really difficult.
But so how can we live in that? Getting back to your
Right.
So what do we do? So here I am, I'm an educator, and I'm actually literally taught behavior management systems that we know now are creating so many unintended consequences that, hey, but let's stop. We got to stop that. And there's some, like some people that are willing to hear that message and some that changes to like, wait, what? I'm literally, this is the best thing I'm at, right? You're really good at it. And then you're telling me that I'm actually doing harm. Out like that's hard. It's a huge grieving process because a lot of our educational prep, a lot of the feedback you get even from families and from the system is that these traditional punitive reaction systems to things in education are going to fix things, right? And we even have this false idea in our head that they do. At the very core base, are we animals? Absolutely. So antecedent behavior consequence. Something happens, We react, and then there's reaction to it, right? And then there's this whole internal motivation piece that comes along with that whole system. Okay, in a medical, in a clinical fashion, you can control so much that you can see some really good physical change from that, right? We can actually observable change when following a system like that. And when we think about the research that's behind it, I always think this is kind of interesting. It's all based on dogs, cats, and birds and things like that. Well, we're not dogs, cats, and birds. We're human. Our language system is so much more complex than other humans. It was really funny. I had a wonderful educator be like, well, have you seen the research on orcas? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure when one of the orcas is playing with a boat, right? Because they like play with like humans and they like bump their boat and hit their rudders. I'm like, if they toss it over and a human dies, I'm pretty sure they don't go, oh, Susie, we have to have a trial to find out whether or not you were liable for that human's death, right? So we're different than animals, even though animals.
They're not even going to. I don't even think they would comprehend that something bad has happened.
Yeah.
It's a whole different level of thinking. And as we're learning about how complex the brain is, we're also learning how little differences can cause different perceptions in our sensory, in the way we look at the world, in the way we receive the world, and in the way we process all that information that the trillions of data points that we are constantly getting thrown at us as we go through our day. Is our processing systems aren't all the same. Right. Is they process things differently. So how can we help in this social management and social understanding, self-management of our neurodiverse partners?
Right. So we start with that flipping that switch of that idea that we need same, right? Because punitive system, that all stuff gets you into same, gets you into, here we go. So if we flip the switch and we say, why is that happening? We get curious and we say, that's an output, right? So a lot of times I end up having conversations about behaviors that are challenging to us, right? We all have the mantra, behaviors of communication, but do we actually follow a belief system of saying behaviors of communication? No, a lot of us will say it out loud, but when you actually think about what do you mean by behaviors of communication, it means the output that you see, what's an observable action, what it looks like, sounds like from somebody else, is the telling of what's going on, right? And so you've got to be curious and flip it to, and we like to think of it in skill sets, because I'm an educator, so we look into what are the skills that I can help support so that person can be the best them they can be, right? So I think about it as the word skill, but I flip it from this behavior or intentional harm is usually what we put to it, to what is the actual skill difference here, or we can say deficit or an emerging skill or a context matching piece. And why we kind of think about that social piece and the emotional piece, right? Because those are the access pieces to the actual academics. Because I can learn ABC 1, 2, 3, but I have to be able to access that. Well, what does it take to access? Well, school is a social learning environment. We leverage people and information around us through conversation, through actual direct communication, like a teacher lecturing, things like that. School's a social situation. So we have to understand a social context and navigate that. And then I've got to stay in a state in which my brain can actually access it, which is all about your central nervous system and your regulatory system, the emotional piece of it, which is very much tied to your feelings and your bias and your everything that makes you you. Okay. So when we think about the social and the emotional, I love that Wisconsin's kind of ahead of the game. When it comes to that idea that this is a piece of education, and we have our social emotional learning competencies that actually gives us a language set to talk about skills. So we can stop saying, nope, that doesn't fit. We don't like that. I'm going to say no and punish it or punitive it out. We can go, wait a second. Why is that child like running from the room? Right? Not let's stop them running from the room. Why the heck do they need to run from the room? What's causing the run? Right? So it could be the social context isn't there, right? They're not seeing the social context in the same way that maybe the teacher is. So I love my perfect example of this is if you're in a room and we're doing chemistry and you get your test in front of you and you're like, this is frustrating. Your body gets triggered. You go into fight and you run from the room. Most of us go, oh, this isn't good, right? You put yourself in danger, all these other things. You're missing the lesson, all that stuff, right? So we want to look at, why are we running from the room? Could it be stress? Could it be? Now let's flip the switch. Let's put something blew up in the chemistry room, right? Now we're hoping people run from the room, right? Everybody get up. I do absolutely love that we as educators think we're all going to get our class list off the wall and like, check, 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 check. No, you're going to be hopefully the last one out, pushing all the kids, run, run, run. Like it is blown up. So social context matters a lot. Now that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, right? But it does. It can be the exact same thing of the output. Context matters. And skill set matters, right? So when we think about skill set, the very base of understanding your central nervous system, that fight, flight, or freeze, is understanding your signals, right? Do I actually know when I'm feeling off? Like whether it's a little bit anxious, a little bit angry, like those escalation scale. Those are things we can be teaching students because we can't just always be reactive. Co-regulation is a huge piece of how we are as humans. So I'm not devaluing it at all. But if we want to move into what we call self-management, the ability to go college, community, or career ready when you leave us and go into whatever you're looking to do, you have to be able to navigate a pretty calm central nervous system to be able to do that. To do that, you need to know your own central nervous system because there's no self-contained McDonald's. There isn't a bunch of educators going, oh, here we go. Let's all, right? That supportive system, hopefully you can build with around your life. It's the only, education's the only time it's legally required to give it to you.
Right.
And so, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
And that goes back to the individualized education plan, is that each person is going to be at a different level of being able to self-regulate. And so we can write into those plans skills to build that student's self-regulation so that they will be able to succeed outside of the safe environment, hopefully safe environment of high school.
Yeah, right. Because a lot of people, you'll hear them talking about it's like falling off a cliff. They leave educational system 18 to 21 and they fall off a cliff because the medical system definitely doesn't pick up as much as we think and want it to, right? And that's the only real system there for people. And in strong legal terms, right?
Right.
So when we think what we can leverage inside school, if we flip the switch from seeing differences as bad, punitive, which is typically the path most people do, right? And we start treating it just like academics. So if I've got an academic skill, a child, and I use this example because I love the word diphthong, but like a child doesn't know a diphthong, right? Well, what do? We break apart why? Oh my gosh. Well, their phonemic awareness, they're not even representing that form of B, that grapheme matches the sound B. Like, so they wouldn't be able to do a diphthong of boy because they didn't even have the sound connection, right? We break things down and we're tasked with it. We're good at it. We have lots of ways to get that done. And then we model it, practice it, and let it go to independence, right? I do, we do, you do. It's the base of teaching. So we're really good with reading, math, social studies, science. We even have all these really nice standards to help us out put language to it. But for access skills like social and emotional, we didn't have that piece. We relied on a system that doesn't match for the most part, right? Because a brand new output, like a student trying to put their hand in a fire, I'm going to say no, stop, fire, hot, right? And then hopefully that skill set builds pretty fast. Fire, hot, don't touch, right? When we've got more complicated things, like being able to be resilient through a tough situation, like a math problem that you're confused by, okay? Then we're like, no, just do it. We're in the pulling up by your bootstraps kind of idea. I'm like, I don't even know if half the people know what bootstraps are anymore. So, but let's flip that. So we think of academics. We identify the skill. We provide the additional support, and then we monitor to see if we have success with that. Cool. We have the system. Let's do it for what we typically call as behavior. What I want to say is it's our social and emotional skills, right? Those skill sets that are going to give us access to reading, writing, math, right? All the other different, because you know what? You can have all the content knowledge on the planet, but if you can't use it, it doesn't matter, right? So you've got to be able to interact, and you've got to be able to say, calm doing it.
Exactly, because that's the part of the great thing about the way we have our school set up is the socialization, is the ability for children to meet other children from different walks of life, to interact with people that maybe they wouldn't have another chance to interact with if it wasn't for school, the opportunity to interact with adults that are not your parents or your forced friends or your forced family, a whole new set of adults that hopefully are using those co-regulation skills. And so it makes sense to me that part of the time we should spend is helping all of our students figure out where they're at in their socialization and how can they socialize better. You know, no one's going to be the best, but how can they, that individual student, do it better so that they have a better opportunity to learn, because that's the environment they're learning in.
And that's the whole purpose of it for an individual education plan, IEP, access, engagement, and progress. These are the reasons why you qualify and are able to get services. That's what we should be working on, that access point. And one of the things we love to stress is it's not about conforming. It's about informing. You have the information, you do with it what you will, but we got to make sure you have the information, because not all of our brains coded all the information the same. So you can't just make an assumption that somebody understands the group thought that is line up. Right, that's a big one that we use forever, and you use lining up as an adult as well. When we think about that, like that concept of what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, in the movement of what's expected by the context can change. Right, a line at Six Flags looks a heck of a lot different than a line at the DMV. Right, when you look in real world, right, but a line has some basic pieces to it. How do you actually build the concept of what standing in line means? And what would be an expected or unexpected piece to that. But then you also have the choice to either engage in it or not. We're not here to force you into it. We're here to say, here's the information for you, and use it as you will. Okay, because that's one of those things when we start talking about social emotional learning that we trip up a lot. We get into forced. You have to be like this. School is the only time in your life you ever have to be in that kind of forced social situation. You never have to put yourself in that again. And you can be highly successful and super healthy mentally and physically, right? School is not, that mode really is a false mode of society. It's like a hyper vigilant piece to it. But can we leverage the time we have there to practice the skill sets so when we do pick our path, we can do that in the most independent as possible? Because that's our goal, no matter where we are in our independence level. It's always, what's our next step? We got in education, we got to work ourselves out of a job. And so when we think about students who are neurodiverse, and most likely the skill sets that are the ones that are the biggest barriers for them, and being able to work their system around them, it's usually social skills, or social understanding, and that emotional piece. And it's not just about, I keep referencing coming back to calm, but it's also being able to be persistent. It's in that resilience piece to be able to move through things. So when I think about the skill sets that we represent in trying to support the state, and understanding, I think about those social skills and social cognition, the thinking about that perspective taking, all the really complicated human things. But I also think about flexibility skills.
Oh yeah,
Resilience skills. You got your regulatory stuff. How do I keep my central nervous system in a place where I can actually access my brain, right? Then you have your sensory piece, whether you have sensory processing disorder, where it actually, your brain is coding in such a different way that it's hard to predict how, and it can cause some pretty impactful things when your brain codes some of the taking in of information, right? But with that sensory piece, we all have a system that we have to navigate. How do I know my body enough to know how to navigate and use those different sensory systems to help myself stay regulated or to gain access, right? And then you've got that whole executive functioning piece. Like, where does my brain where is it really efficient and where is it not so efficient? And we all have different layers of that. Sometimes we have students where you see significant differences in that processing piece, or usually it's time and lagging, or in that retention, the ability to maintain and remember.
Yeah, and a lot of times I see it, because I've seen it with my own son, and to a lesser extent, I have found ways through my years to get around it.
Right.
It's like, I'm not sure if what would be called executive functioning skills have ever improved. I've just found ways to make do with what I have, and I've found workarounds, and I've learned what I can drop and what I can't drop, and but do I plan ahead well? No, I do not. I to look at something and break it down in these little chunk pieces is still very, very hard for me. And I know it's hard for my son as well. Before we get into a little bit more, I do want to let people know that they are more than welcome to engage in this discussion, engage with this conversation, talk to us about what they have seen in the area of neurodiversity and being able to coordinate that classroom or a personal life, because it's our neurodiverse students are our neurodiverse children. So they go home at the end of the night. So please feel free to put any questions, comments in the chat. I'll be more than happy to reflect those back to the group. Feel free to unmute and I'll call on you. And as you are organizing your thoughts, which I hope you are, because we want a discussion, I can't help to think, Katie, that the other part of this equation is what do we and how do we teach the rest of that classroom about neurodiversity, about the different ways that this student may react emotionally, that this student is having trouble with executive functioning, without setting them out. But do you have ideas about how we could do a better job of helping the rest of the students accept neurodiversity and not fall into that, well, this is what my third grade classmates do, this is how they react, this is
without like Johnny does this, and this. So
right.
You have to say that's Johnny, right? And move the typical, which isn't. Yeah, there are a lot of people that
which is not
will approach that way, and that's
right.
not
Which is not.
negative.
It's not horribly bad. It's a nice.
It's a method.
It's a nice step. It's a nice method. Yeah. But at some point we have to
make a system.
We have to breach the subject that the world's not very welcoming.
No,
to neurodiversity.
Right.
And sometimes other students are not welcoming to neurodiversity. So as much as we want to build the skills of that neurodiverse student in social and emotional management, in social skills, and in executive functioning, we also have this job to change the culture to be more accepting.
That's pretty hard, right?
Oh, huge.
Right. So when, I mean, we think about all the different layers of how we show up and what we're trying to do society wise. You know, we struggle really, really big time. But when we think about inside education, what can I do? Right? What can I do as a family member engaging in an educational system, or what can I do as an educator inside it? Right? It's the same basic thing of teaching academics. It's I do, we do, you do. You model it, you get exposure and practice with it, and then you set up situations for people to practice it. So when we think about what is, you know, think about the neuroaffirming movement. Yeah, you're like that's the language a lot of people are using now, saying, you know, there's hardcore big political fights over neuroaffirming stuff. When I think about it, it's about showing up for human, right? And how do I take a step to do that? So as you think about what's your locus of control, and where that's in and what you have to be able to expose things to. So if I think about a student who has, let's go sensory processing differences, right? And so the reactions to things are very clearly seen, and it's very different than everybody else. This is one that a lot of people can identify with when you have a child on this, or when you have a student on the spectrum that you've experienced and they have sensory processing disorder, which not all people with autism have sensory processing disorders. I'll put that out there. But it is one people come to commonly. Right. So instead of going, oh, let's get Johnny headphones and teach everybody that these are Johnny's headphones, give Johnny his headphones when he needs them. Why don't we teach why we need headphones? When things get too loud, we can use noise canceling headphones, and we have 5 of them in the bucket here. Please, let's leave Johnny's because Johnny's ears hear things harder than yours do. Right. But yours still do that bell, the alarm when the fire goes off. I see half of you cringe. If you need to while we're walking out, grab one of those headphones. It's okay, because that's what that's for. We demystify, we model. I used to always, I mean, I still have them. They're like, if I won't grab them right now because they're up there, but I would be like, wow, this learning is really loud. Like I can't, and I put the headphones on because learning is loud at times. And I'm not I would just end up yelling at people to be quiet. Right? No, do your work quietly. So instead of yelling at them, I'd put the headphones on because I was the one with the issue, not what was going on. The learning was just loud. So when we start modeling those pieces, that's the one thing I can control that right here, right? I don't need any product. I can just model how to be adjusting to ways that people show up different, right? Then I can put the next layer. How do I actually get in some practice? And what we hope within our supporting neurodiverse students professional learning system is to give people thoughts and ideas of what that could look like, right? In education, how do I actually teach some of these skills or set up a system to adjust to people, right? Universal design for learning is another really good pocket of educational path that you can look into, which is not just education, UDL, but that would help you get some of the learning to know, like, okay, Katie, what's that look like, sound like? What do I actually do to make this happen? Language use. So when I talk about, if I back up one to the modeling, the way I language things out is really important. Language is like toothpaste. Once it's out, it's out. Can't shove it back in. And it impacts other people. So when I describe somebody, when I think about, that's why I do like to have courageous conversations with people who balk back at the idea of like, why do I need to pay attention to pronouns? Why do I need to, like say this so loud? You know what I mean when I say SPED. Why do I need to say a student who receives services? And I'm like, because think about the difference between calling somebody a SPED kid or a child who receives services. A child who receives services is a kid first. That's a kid that, yeah, they have a service. Cool. It's whatever they need to make it happen. I'm so glad we have a legal system that makes that happen, right? You say SPED, now you've silent. Now they're totally different. Now there's something that well, here I am. I don't have to deal with that because you're the SPED department, right? And so we can silo, but we do it within special education. We were like, here, my SPED kids, come over here, right? So when we think about language things, I can interrupt my language patterns. Pick something you want to change. Start there. Okay. So when we get to that next section, the actual like practicing and teaching, I can think about those skill sets. I can think about where do I want to go and where am I coming from? So we do have our social emotional learning competencies here in Wisconsin. That gives you a good breadth of developmental. I'm going to propose, ignore the ages. They're a little messed up now because of COVID, but the progression is that, is the same. But a lot of times when we're talking about kids that people reach out to our grant for, they're the students that's not broken down enough. That we need to go a little bit further. So we look at some more of the developmental pieces, and there's lots of I call them pretty products. There's lots of pretty products out there or developmental scales that help us break down some of the things that are like social cognition. That's one thing that thinking about other people's thinking, like, can you remember a time when somebody actually directly taught you how to take somebody else's perspective? No, we heard things like, oh, like live a minute in their shoes. And then you had to process what the heck that meant, right? But there wasn't somebody who said, well, perspective taking is actually thinking about your own thinking, knowing your own self, being able to know there's somebody else who is having a thought, that their thought might match the context, might not, it could be different, and taking a best guess of what that thought could be based on the situations of what they're giving to you, right? I mean, that's a really simplistic way of looking perspective taking, but that's where we're at. And then when does that actually start happening? That's the other thing we need to be aware of. We make huge assumptions about students, especially when their developmental path is a little bit different than the kid next to them, that they have all the skill sets they need to be able to produce the action you're actually looking at. So that perspective taking, right? We expect that people automatically understand that somebody else has a thought. That's not a guarantee. And that's not a bad thing. It's not like it's missing from somebody else. It's just their brain didn't trigger into a pattern of adjusting to another path, right? That's why so many of our kids with neurodiversity look so rigid. But that can happen to you when you're really hijacked. Ever gotten on a thought process because you're super anxious and you can't get off of it? You don't have to be having a major divergent difference for this to be, it's just human. It's more intense and more frequent for a student who's diagnosed with anxiety or a student diagnosed with, who might fall under a diagnosis of autism. It's all the same human patterns we all have.
And Katie, I think back to that, making an environment so that everybody can learn.
Right.
You were just talking about with perspective taking. The first thing that came to mind is how when classes read the same book together, mm-hmm. and they hear the same story, what a natural conversation that is to say, well, what do you think this character was thinking at that time?
Right.
Well, how did the character react? What do you think what were they thinking that made them react that way? And we have these discussions then using other people's stories to talk about perspective taking. But what happens when that student isn't in that classroom, that neurodiverse student isn't accessing that learning experience, learning about perspective taking? As we teach perspective taking to everybody, they need to be there. Whether they're nonverbal, whether they communicate differently, is they need to learn that skill as well.
I think
So it goes back to what you were talking about with access.
right? You got me thinking two things here. First of all, is that a lot of times in education will be like, I can't add anymore. I'm not asking to add anymore. I'm asking to go deeper in what you're already doing. And a lot of times that's just staying curious. I'm reading Where the Red Fern Grows, and we're doing okay. I'm already reading it. It's got characters. Cool. This student has an IEP goal on getting through, microaggressions. All right, let's show like how when somebody is a barrier to you, you get through that through the book we're reading already. So I'm going to dive into a piece of that. Or grief and handling upset. I don't know why I went into Red Fern Grows. It's been a really long time since I read that, so I hope I'm remembering what it's all about. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a major death in it as well, right? So there's how do I deal with something that is a major emotional piece? Cool, we can dive in farther into that for the students we have. The other piece that you're bringing up, Tim, is access. So when we think about logistically what's happened, and we go in these phases of in and out, and I'm not all about all in or all out. Because if you're talking about an individual, I want to go, did you have a quality conversation about where the best access point is for that student? That's where my question is. The problem is we don't have those conversations. So we have a system of checks that makes you say all in. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not all in, but guess what? 99.9% of the time, we're not making a conversation that would tell me that I'm okay that they're all out. You didn't make a conversation. We have so many shortened days, so many things that you're like, why are we denying this child access? The child does something and they send them from the room. Why?
And it's a natural, it's one of those natural reactions in the world. Is I know nobody that wakes up and says, I'm going to figure out how to make my day more difficult.
Right.
We have responsibilities, and we want things to go smoothly. We want them to go smoothly for most people. And so we will jump to the solution that causes us the less pain.
That's right.
That causes us the less work. It's very human. But once we begin to be conscious of that, we can start to make different choices.
Right. You know better, you do better. Right. But know better and do better takes effort, and change is hard. That's how we started this. Change is hard. Our bodies don't want to do it. Our brains don't want to do it. Our bodies don't want to do it. It actively works against it. We think about, it's funny when you look at a group of adults in a learning situation, and I do love to call it out when I'm like, okay, so if a student was doing what you're doing right now, what would we do? What should I do as the educator with what's happening with you right now? Right? Typically, I would say leave. You took down that whole group. You're talking about stuff that's not supposed to happen. That's it. Go. Gone. Right? We're getting much better than that. But I think we've all had experiences either with our own family or ourselves where you were asked to leave because you didn't fit like the programming, right? Well, that person now gets less access. And our students with special education services have the most disjointed education out there. And they're probably most likely the ones that need the most consistent education out there, because that flexibility part is not something their brain is totally doing well right now.
And they don't not only have that disjointedness, and not only do they have that separateness, but then they have that emotional reaction of, I'm not good enough. I don't belong here.
I'm broken.
There's one place where every single student should belong. It is their school. Is everybody needs to believe that that is their school, and that is where they belong. We need that sense of belonging.
And that belongingness isn't just isn't it great if everybody belongs? No, it actually helps you code better. So you want to have a really good learner, you need to have a learner that has relationships. You need a learner that shows up and says, you know what, I am who I am, and that's okay. I'm not broken, right? But all of our systems, not all of our systems, I'm speaking very generally and I shouldn't be, but a lot of our systems are set up to say, no, you're not fitting, you are broken. Well, if we could just start flipping the switch and thinking about, you're right. Okay, that output and when we have behavior or things that are happening that have impact on people, it's even harder, right? So when a student's reaction is they have put their hand around somebody else's neck, and when they get hijacked, they actually go to choking other children. That's high impact pieces here that we have to break down, because that other child, like that experience matters too. But how do we approach it? We pivot. We don't say, no, you can't choke. Yeah, the end goal is no choking. Hands down, we're all on the same page. But what are we doing to say, what is going on with your body, and where can I go, hey, can I help? Versus get gone. Because get gone gets, okay, now they're only going to be here 20% of the time. Now you are shortened day. Now you are, right? And we keep dividing because we're not just taking them in to stay curious and say, wait a second, what's going on here? And how we do. Now, we definitely have to mitigate the effects as we go through this.
Right.
And what gets really difficult in education is the competing needs. So you have your need of the child learning whose systems gets hijacked and other people have high impact on it. They're harming others, basically, right? So you have the needs of trying to help that student get what they need to have their body feel calm enough that it's not in fight mode all the time. But then you have other people who are getting impacted by that body, and those, those don't fit. So we try to get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to having those match. And do they always match? No, there's a lot of times they don't. But we're always making efforts to make sure that each side has as much as we can give. What we often do is take and we go, okay, the people who are impacted are the ones that matter. Whether it's a teacher who can't get through a lesson because the child is making noises, or whether it's somebody getting hurt, right? We go and we say they're more important, and we look to use get gone, right, as the other piece, versus staying curious and saying, nope, what's the next step? How do we keep impact? Impact matters. I don't want to say that impact doesn't matter.
Absolutely not.
But where are we going to help that person? Because the signs that we're seeing, those things that are right, even if it's just a noise bothering a teacher, right? Where, okay, well, why do we need a noise? And if they do need that noise, all right, teacher, how do we adjust? You put headphones on. That's an okay method for this as well. So when we think about that model, I always go back to that system, just like we do with academics. Model, practice, teach, right? And then set up situations for positive things to hopefully happen, right? That positive independent practice. Where do we make the release? Where do we have the student in a situation where they can utilize the skills we had and not need us anymore? We're consciously thinking about those things. It's explicit instruction versus just hoping we set a visual schedule and hopefully they'll follow using the coping system I used. It'll be happy, right? Here we go. I taught it. Sometimes we go heavy into teaching or heavy into just reactions. And we don't think about, nope, it starts with modeling. I always love when people like, he's so disrespectful. And I want to go, well, I've watched you for 20 minutes and you haven't respected him once. Where's he learning it? Right? You got to look at what's the model? What am I actually thinking about teaching, and knowing whether or not I'm getting growth. Progress monitoring, which ends up being data, which a lot of people don't like to take data, right? Okay. And then the next piece, how am I fading myself out? They don't need me. In education, we have educator effectiveness, which is most people will call it an evaluation system, but it's basically like, what are some of the qualifiers? What are some of the components of really, really good teaching? And the ones that get you coded the best, like here you go, this is some high quality education. What can that observer see? The kids doing it themselves, not needing the teacher whatsoever. That's how you see a really high quality educational system working, is when those students have gotten to a point they don't need you anymore. And so when we think about social and emotional skills, that's a really tricky piece to be going into. So there's no end of the chapter test for that to know, like, here we go, right?
Well, and Katie, I can't help but think that what you described is also the goal of parenting.
Oh, yes.
We want our children without disabilities to grow up to be as independent, as self-determined, living as much of their own life that they want to live, making those decisions for themselves, doing what they want to do. I mean, that's the goal for our children. And I know that we are running at the end, and I will freely admit that I have done a really bad job as a discussion leader. Now, I've had a really lot of fun.
I overtalked him, so it's okay. Katie.
And we know this is going to happen every time that we talk and have conversations. Doesn't stop us. So sometimes knowledge doesn't change anything. I knew going in. But I appreciate everybody being here. Katie, I also, the last thing that I would say is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves and for our families and for our students is to hold that space for grace. Understanding that change takes time. Understanding that what you are talking about, of moving from a punitive get out so the rest of us can be better off, that's been in place for decades. And so it's going to take some time. And so let's give each other a little bit of grace to try those different things, to make those mistakes, maybe even to be able to learn from each other. Is there something that the family can learn from what the teacher is doing, the methods, the relationship that they're building? And is there something that the educators can learn from the family, where that child is also present for multiple hours out of the day? So let's have those conversations too. Is this behavior, is this dysregulation something that we're seeing across the board? Or is it particular to third period math class? And if so, let's take a look at what's different in third period math class than the rest of the student's life. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Did they not get a bathroom break? What is different from that? And that again goes for all students, not just students with IEPs.
Right. Because who are students with IEPs? Just students with services.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Katie. I'm going to release you all so that if you are doing this under your lunch, you get 10 minutes left of your lunch. I did put a feedback form in the grant. We also have the link to the supporting neurodiverse students professional learning system. Please feel free to check out the number of resources, number of trainings and events that are available. Get your families involved, get your educators involved.
Families are free.
Yes. Let's continue to move forward, even if it is one little step at a time. Our path is moving forward. So thank you, Katie, for being part of that forward movement.
Thanks,
everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.